Time for a look at the League Championship Series results in our Simulated Baseball League. We have two series to talk about. The Red Sox and the Braves in one series, and the Cardinals and the Indians in the other series. So we'll start with the National League side of our geographic alignment, the Red Sox and Braves. Game 1 of that series was Saturday afternoon, February the 15th in our simulations. And Atlanta won the opener in Atlanta 3-0. The Braves getting home field in this series because they were a better record, and also the Red Sox were a wild card. The Braves had 95 victories, and the Red Sox 94 during the regular season. There were no home runs in the game. Greg Maddux got the victory, 2-0 in postseason. Cy Young the loss, 0-2 in postseason. And Craig Kimbrell, his first postseason save. The Atlanta runs were scored in the fourth and the fifth innings. In the fourth, Bill Sweeney, who was on the Boston Braves of 1912, led off with a single. Chipper Jones singled into right field. Eddie Matthews hit into a fielder's choice. Tommy Holmes flew out, and then with two out, Hank Aaron a ground ball single that drove home the first run in the person of Sweeney before Dale Murphy struck out. The Braves added two in the fifth. Felipe Alou a leadoff double on a bloop. Joe Torre doubled him home on a line drive to right center. And then Martin Prado drove home Torre with a single. So the first three reached. The Braves actually would put their first four on base, but the Red Sox would get out of it. Boston got the leadoff man out in the sixth, but a double play after one out snuffed out any hope of a rally in that inning. In the seventh, the Red Sox were retired in order. In the eighth, the Red Sox got a man on with two out, but they couldn't get to the tying run to the plate. And then in the ninth, against Craig Kimbrell, the Red Sox got their leadoff man on, and then were retired in order after that. So Boston never even got the tying run to the plate in the first game. In Game 2, the Red Sox exploded offensively, and they won going away by the score of 10-5. Boston doing most of their damage in the second inning with 6 runs. They would tack on a run in the third and 3 in the seventh. Atlanta picked up a pair in the fifth, and then they picked up 3 in the eighth to at least make the game potentially interesting. Dutch Leonard the win, 2-0. And the Atlanta loss to Tom Hughes, 0-1. And in the home run department, Boggs, Yastrzemski, Valentin all homered for Boston. Boggs with number 1, Yastrzemski number 3, John Valentin number 2 in the postseason. And no Atlanta home runs in the game. Here's how the runs came home in the second inning for Boston. Jim Rice a leadoff walk. Fred Lynn singled. Carlton Fisk singled. That got the first run home, 1-0. Valentin singled to run home, 2-0. Boggs was walked. That loaded the bases. Yastrzemski's home run, a grand slam, and that was the big blow. That made it 6-0 Boston, and that knocked out the starter Hughes for Atlanta. Rick Camp would come on and get Atlanta out of the second inning. Red Sox added a run in the third. Carlton Fisk doubled to lead it off, and with one out, Wade Boggs singled him home, 7-0 Boston, and that's where it would stay until the bottom of the fifth when Atlanta picked up a pair. Hank Aaron singled to lead it off. Murphy doubled. That drove Aaron home. And then after Felipe Alou bounced out, Joe Torre a bloop single that drove home Dale Murphy. 7-2 Boston. And then the Braves would not send any additional base runners as they would be retired in their next two at-bats. Boston basically put the game away for good in the seventh with 3 runs. John Valentin homered to lead it off. Boggs followed with his home run. That made it 9-2. And then Yastrzemski singled. Ted Williams hit into a force. David Ortiz flew out, but then with 2 out, Gene Garber came on and he gave up a hit to Petrocelli, a single, and Jim Rice singled, and that made it 10-2 in favor of Boston before the Red Sox were retired in the 7th inning. The Braves would rally in the 8th inning to at least make it a closer game. Sweeney a single, Chipper Jones walked, Ted Williams a 2-base error that allowed the run to score. It was 10-3, and they had 2 runners in scoring position. Tommy Holmes then popped out. Hank Aaron flew out. Chipper Jones scored on the sacrifice fly. 2 out, 10-4 Boston. And then another error by a Boston outfielder made it 10-5. And that had Caparelli going. And then Papelbon came on and walked Alou. So 10-5, 2 on, 2 out. Atlanta had the tying run up into the hold, but Joe Torre struck out. They were 2 batters away from getting a tying run to the plate. They scored 3 and left 2 on, and that's as close as they got. The Braves were retired in order in the 9th inning. Tom Wright committed that error that continued the inning, the second error. Tom Wright's a backup outfielder who was on the Red Sox in 1950, and he had come in as a defensive replacement. So defensive woes in the Boston outfield hurt them, but they survived, and they won Game 2, 10-5. Game 3 at Boston in the best of 7 on Sunday morning the 16th, and Atlanta won in a huge rout, 15-1. Warren Spahn the win, 1-1 for postseason. George Winter the lost, 1-1 in postseason. The Braves jumped out quickly. They had 3 in the first. And then they didn't score again until the 8th inning when they put 2 on the board. And then they had a 10-run 9th inning. 10 in the 9th. 15 runs on 20 hits for Atlanta. The Red Sox actually scored their only run in the very first inning. And they only had 5 hits in the game. So let's tell you how the runs came home in the Atlanta first against Winter. Bill Sweeney walked, Chipper Jones singled. After Eddie Matthews hit into a forced play, runners at first and third. Tommy Holmes singled home Sweeney. That made it 1-0. Hank Aaron singled. That loaded the bases. Dale Murphy singled home 2. There was still only 1 out. 3-0 Atlanta. Felipe Alou flew out. Joe Torre hit into a fielder's choice. 3-0 Atlanta to the bottom of the first. Boston in the bottom of the inning would get a bloop leadoff double from Boggs. Yastrzemski bounced out. Ted Williams flew out. That flyout drove home what turned out to be the only Red Sox run of the game, and they would not have any more batters reach base in the first. It stayed 3-1 all the way to the 8th inning. And then in the 8th inning for Atlanta, Boston, well, let's back up to the seventh inning. Boston had a chance in the seventh inning, their best chance of the game, with one out. Petrocelli singled. After Rice struck out, Fred Lynn was walked. 2 on, 2 out. Go ahead run at the plate. And Carlton Fisk took strike 3 and was called out on strikes. The Atlanta in the eighth then responded with a leadoff single by Murphy, who stole second base. Felipe Alou moved him to third on a ground out. Joe Torre singled home Murphy. Martin Prado was walked. Bill Sweeney a fielder's choice. So runners 2 on and 2 out. Sweeney stole second, so now runners at second and third with 2 out. Scott Atchison came on. He walked Chipper Jones. He walked Eddie Matthews, and that forced home a run. That made it 5-1 before Tommy Holmes flew out to shallow right center. The Braves made a lot of defensive changes in the bottom of the eighth. Johnny Logan came into the game at short. Les Mann came into center. Martin Prado moved to third. Dale Murphy to left. Red Sox got a leadoff single and then a double play, snuffed that out, and they didn't do anything else in the eighth. And then in the ninth, Atlanta absolutely put the hammer down against Elmer Steele, who's a good reliever for Boston. He pitched on their club way back in the old days. Hank Aaron singled. Dale Murphy singled. Felipe Alou singled. That made it 6-1 as Aaron came home. 2-1, nobody out. Joe Torre singled. Murphy scores 7-1. Martin Prado doubled home a pair, 9-1. Bill Sweeney singled. Prado's in. It's 10-1. There's still nobody out. Chipper Jones bounced to first. Logan was walked. 2 on, 1 out. Mann hit into a force play. 2 on, 2 out. Runners on the corners. 10-1 Atlanta. Hank Aaron a 3-run home run. 13-1 Braves. Dale Murphy singled. Felipe Alou a 2-run home run. 15-1 Atlanta. Joe Torre struck out to end the massacre. And that was all she wrote. 15-1 Braves win Game 3. They lead the series 2-1. Atlanta would win Game 4 5-4. Played on Sunday afternoon, February 16 at Fenway. 5-4 Braves. And Atlanta scored all 5 of their runs in the fourth inning. So the big inning, the key to this series for the Braves. The Red Sox, meanwhile, single runs in the second, third, and fourth, and seventh. The Red Sox had more hits than Atlanta, and the Braves also had some defensive miscues. The Braves were 5 runs, 10 hits, 3 errors. Red Sox were 4 runs, 11 hits, and no errors. But Atlanta wins Game 4. They're up 3-1 in the series. Art Neff, the win for Atlanta. 2-0. Craig Kimbrell saved 2. The Boston loss to Jim Lomberg 0-1. Chipper Jones hit number 2 for Atlanta, and it was the only home run of the game. So let's tell you how the runs came home. Boston in the second inning, David Ortiz walked. Petrocelli hit into a double play, but then with 2 out, Rice a single, Lynn a single, Fisk a single, and that drove home Rice 1-0 Boston before John Valentin flew out. The Red Sox would tack on a second run in the third. Boggs a leadoff single. Murphy a misplay on an error, a fly ball that he mishandled. 2 on, no 1 out. Ted Williams singled. It's 2-0 Boston. They've got 2 on and nobody out. But then Ortiz hit into a double play, and Petrocelli walked, and Rice struck out. So the Red Sox could have done more in the third. They didn't. Atlanta then took advantage with all of their runs in the fourth. Aaron a single. He stole second. Lomberg a wild pitch, sent Aaron to third. Murphy struck out. Alou bounced out. That got Aaron home. 2-1 Boston. 2 out, no 1 on in the fourth. But then with 2 out, Atlanta rallied. Torre hit by a pitch. Prado a single. Sweeney a single. That tied the game at 2. 2 on, 2 out. Chipper Jones, a 3-run home run to left center, and that knocked out Lonborg, and it made it 5-2 Atlanta. The Braves would not score another run in the game, but as it turned out, they had just enough. Boston, in the fourth, a leadoff single by Lynn, and then after 2 groundouts, Boggs a single that drove home Lynn. It was 5-3, and Yastrzemski was called out on strikes. The Red Sox in the 5th inning, down 5-3, got the leadoff man on base, Ted Williams, but then the next 3 batters were retired in order. In the 6th, the Red Sox got a man on with 1 out as Fisk reached on a Prado error. Valentin was walked, 2 on, 1 out. Boggs hit into a fielder's choice, and Yastrzemski bounced to first. The Red Sox would get a run in the 7th to make it 5-4. Ted Williams a ground rule double. Ortiz struck out. Petrocelli bounced out. Rice doubled to left. That made it 5-4, so the tying run now at second base with 2 out. Fred Lynn intentionally walked. How about that? Put the go-ahead run on base to get to Carlton Fisk, who flew out the deep center, and the Red Sox don't take advantage. Boston in the 8th inning would get a leadoff single by Valentin. Boggs bounced out. Yastrzemski flew to deep right. Ted Williams walked. They have 2 on, 2 out. And against Gene Garber, who came in, David Ortiz flew out to deep center. Then in the 9th inning, Kimbrel comes on, and he gets Petrocelli to pop out. Prado an error that allowed Rice to get on base, so the winning run at the plate, but Lynn struck out and Fisk struck out, and Atlanta won the game 5-4. Man, in real life, that would have been a lot of fun to see that game. So then we go to Game 5. Braves have a chance to win the whole thing, and they do. The final was 6-4. And Atlanta would rally late to win this game. The Red Sox had a run in the 4th, led 1-0. Atlanta then scores 2 in the 7th to lead 2-1. They scored 4 in the 8th. Atlanta led 6-1. Boston 3 in the 8th to tighten it up to a 6-4 game. And that is how it would end. The Red Sox had 4 runs on 6 hits and an error. And the Braves, 6 runs on 13 hits and no errors. Tom Glavine, the victory. Rafael Soriano, the save. And Ernie Shore took the loss. Yastrzemski and Williams homered for Boston, number 4 in the postseason for Yastrzemski, number 2 for Ted Williams. Let's tell you how the runs came home. Boston in the 4th, a 1-out single for Yastrzemski, a wild pitch advanced him to second, and then after Ted Williams popped out and David Ortiz walked, Rico Petrocelli walked, Jim Rice walked, Glavine was wild, walked in a run, 1-0 Boston, 2 out. Fred Lynn struck out, and so the damage was limited. As it turned out, that would come back to help the Braves in a big way. Atlanta then would score 2 in the 7th to go up in front by a 2-1 score. Boston, through 6 innings, by the way, only had 1 hit. In the 7th, Yastrzemski, who was the first baseman, committed an error, and that allowed Tommy Holmes to reach. Hank Aaron flew out. Murphy popped up, but with 2 out, Felipe Alou a ground rule double. So now you got an error and a ground rule double to put 2 runners in scoring position, and both of those runs would score when Torrey singled with 2 out. Prado would single before Bill Sweeney bounced out. 2-1 Atlanta, going to the bottom of the 7th. Red Sox going to the bottom of the 7th, like I said, only 1 run on 1 hit. With 1 out, Jim Rice singled in the 7th, but Fred Lynn struck out and Fisk flew out to, yes, deep center. Atlanta would then, as it turned out, put the game away in the 8th inning. Chipper Jones a walk, Eddie Matthews a single. Tommy Holmes a single. That got Jones home 3-1. Aaron struck out. Murphy singled home or doubled home 2. That made it 5-1. Atchison comes on. He gives up a bloop double to right for Alou. That makes it 6-1 Atlanta. Joe Torre then bounced out, and Martin Prado bounced out. Boston would rally in the 8th as John Valentin would single on a Texas leaguer. After Wade Boggs popped out, Carl Yastrzemski had a 2-run home run that made it 6-3. Ted Williams homered, that made it 6-4. And so now you've got some momentum for Boston. Garber comes on. He strikes out Ortiz, and he gets Petrocelli to line to second. Atlanta in the 9th, trying to get insurance. Got the first 2 guys on base. Sweeney and Jones both singled. Elmer Steele came on and got out of a mess. Logan hit into a fielder's choice. Runners at first and third. Les Mann flew out to shallow left center, and Hank Aaron hit into a fielder's choice. And so Boston got out of it, had a chance to do something in the 9th. And Jim Rice was walked. Fred Lynn was walked. 2 on, no one out. Soriano comes on. Rafael Soriano. Fisk singles. The bases are loaded. There's nobody out. Well, this is the story of the series for Boston. The bases are loaded. Nobody out. John Valentin hits into a 5-2-3 double play. Around the horn the reverse way. Third, home, first. But you still got runners at second and third, so a base hit could have tied the game, and Boggs flew out to left center, and that ended the game and the series. The Braves win 6-4, and they win the series 4-1. So Atlanta is the National League representative in the World Series, and the Braves will await the winner of the Cardinals and the Indians from the American League side of our special alignment. So we'll now tell you about that series and how it ended. Cleveland was the home field club here. They won 92 games as the winner in the American League East. The Cardinals were placed in the American League Central, and they won 89 games. Cleveland home field, Game 1, Saturday afternoon, February 15. Cardinals win it 6-2. Bob Gibson the win, 2-0 in postseason, and the Cleveland loss to Addie Joss 1-1. Home runs for the Cardinals, Pujols number 2 and McGuire number 1. Tomei hit number 1 for Cleveland. The Cardinals scored a run in the second inning. They had 2 in the 5th, and they put the game out of reach with 3 in the 9th. Cleveland had picked up runs in the 2nd and 3rd to actually, at one point, take the lead before St. Louis would come back and ultimately win the game. So let's tell you how the runs came home. In the St. Louis second, Mark McGuire flew out, but then with 1 out, Ted Simmons a single. Fernando Tatis walked. Frankie Fresh walked, bases loaded. Steve Braun, a backup outfielder in the 1983 Cardinals, had put up some good numbers at the tail end of the regular season and was inserted into the starting lineup. Braun drew a walk, and that got a run home, 1-0 St. Louis. Ozzie Smith flew out. Willie McGee bounced out, 1-0 St. Louis. In the bottom of the second, Cleveland would tie the game. Tomei, a 1-out home run. That would be the only base runner they'd get in the second inning. In the third, Cleveland took the lead 2-1. With 1 out, Kenny Lofton a bloop single. Boudreaux hit into a fielder's choice, and then with 2 out, Manny Ramirez a single. Albert Bell a single. Lofton scores. 2-1 Cleveland. They had 2 on, 2 out. And Al Rosen hit into a fielder's choice. The Cardinals got out of that, and it would turn out to be a critical thing for them as they would come back. St. Louis in the 5th, Willie McGee a leadoff walk. He stole second base. Musial then tripled him home. It was tied at 2. And then after Pujols popped out and McGuire hit a drive to deep left that was for a second out, which turns into a sacrifice fly. and it's 3-2 St. Louis. The Cardinals would get another base runner, but they would not add any additional runs. The game would stay at 3-2 for quite a while. Cleveland had a double with 2 out in the 5th, but they couldn't cash that in. The Cardinals in the 6th had the bases loaded with 2 out, but couldn't score. Cleveland in the bottom of the 6th got the leadoff man on, erased in a double play. In the 7th, St. Louis would put a man on with 1 out, and Cleveland would get out of that. In the Cleveland 7th, they would be retired in order. In the Cardinal 8th, a leadoff walk and nothing else, and so the Cardinals would strand that runner. Cleveland in the 8th, down 3-2, and they got a man on with 1 out, and nothing developed from that. They had the go-ahead run at the plate. Cardinals got out of it. St. Louis then put the game out of reach in the 9th. Pujols, a leadoff home run. McGuire followed that with a home run, and all of a sudden, a 3-2 game was now a 5-2 game. Simmons would then bounce out to first. Tatis a double with 1 out, and Frisch would single him home, and that made it 6-2. And that ended effectively any hope for a Cleveland rally. And in the bottom of the 9th, Cleveland would be retired in order. 6-2 Cardinals win Game 1 of that series. Game 2 at Cleveland, Saturday night, the 15th of February, and the Cardinals would win this one as well by a 4-3 score. The Cardinals scored 2 runs in the 4th, and they had single tallies in the 7th and the 8th. Cleveland had taken the lead early again with a run in the 1st, and then they would pick up 2 in the 8th to tighten the score, but it wasn't enough. The Indians were 3 runs, 8 hits, and an error. The Cardinals were 4 runs, 8 hits, and no errors. John Tudor the win, 2-0. Jason Mott saved 2. Louis Tiant the loss, 0-1. Cardinal home runs. Tatis hit number 1. For Cleveland, Boudreau hit number 1. Well, let's tell you how the runs came home. Cleveland, as I mentioned, got the first run of the game. Lofton singled to lead it off. He stole second. Boudreau flew out down the left field line and still managed to get Lofton to third on a sac fly. That's what speed will do. And a Manny Ramirez single will drive home Lofton. 1-0 Cleveland. St. Louis would pick up 2 in the 4th to go up 2-1. In the 4th for the Cardinals, McGee a leadoff single, Musial lined out, but then Tomei an error. McGuire walks, so 2 on, now 3 on, 1 out, bases loaded, I should say. And Ted Simmons hits a single that ties the game, and then Tatis hits a sacrifice fly to left center, 2-1 St. Louis. And as it turns out, that extra run from that sacrifice fly would be the difference in the game. The Cardinals would then pick up those additional runs in the 7th and the 8th. In the Cardinals' 7th, Tatis hit a leadoff home run. That made it 3-1 St. Louis. He played a big role in how the game would go. Ozzie Smith would single with 2 out and then get gunned down. Cleveland would be retired in order in the 7th, and the Cardinals would pick up another run in the 8th inning. McGee singled. Musial flew out. McGee then stole second. With 1 out, Pujols walked. McGuire walked. Ted Simmons, a sac fly, a run scores. And so it's 4-1 Cardinals. Tatis was then struck out. So the Cardinals got 2 of their 4 runs on sacrifice flies. Not often you see that happen. In the bottom of the 8th for Cleveland, leadoff single Lofton. Boudreau, 2-run home run. So now it's 4-3, nobody out. Cleveland's got their chances. Ramirez struck out. Albert Bell flew out. Al Rosen bounced to third. That's the 8th. The Cardinals in the 9th would be retired in order. So Cleveland would then come up for their last shot. Jason Mott, the pitcher, he struck out Tomei. He struck out Lou Fonseca from the 1920s era Indians. And Bobby Avila bounced to first to end the game. Cardinals win Game 2 4-3 and take a 2-0 lead in the series. Game 3 at St. Louis, Sunday morning, February 16. And the Cardinals would win this one as well. The final in that, 7-2. Cardinals take a 3-0 lead in the series. The Cardinals are running the 4th to go up 1-0. Cleveland tied it with a run in the 5th. But then St. Louis with 5 in the 5th would go up 5-1. Cleveland a run in the 6th made it 5-2. The Cardinals 2 in the 7th to win 7-2. Wainwright the win 2-0. Mike Garcia took the loss. Garcia 1-1 in postseason. Ted Simmons of St. Louis the only home run. His first postseason home run. Let's tell you how the runs came home. The Cardinals in the 4th, a leadoff double by Ted Simmons. After Tatis struck out and Frisch flew out, Hendricks singled home Simmons 1-0 Cardinals. That would be George Hendrick, who was on the 1980 St. Louis Ball Club. Ozzie Smith would fly out to end the inning. Cleveland in the 5th would tie it with 2 out. An error for Ozzie Smith, of all people. That allowed Bobby Avila to reach. Victor Martinez singled, and Kenny Lofton singled. That tied the game at 1. 2 on and 2 out. Boudreau bounced out. The big inning would then be in the bottom of the 5th for the Cardinals. After McGee struck out, Musial singled, Pujols struck out, so 2 out and only 1 on. McGuire walks. Ted Simmons singles home a run. It's 2-1 St. Louis. Tatis singles home a run, 3-1. Frisch doubles home 2, and it's 5-1 Cardinals. Hendrick would bounce out to end the inning, but the damage had been done. Cleveland in the 6th would pick up its second and final run. After Ramirez flew out, Albert Bell singled, Al Rosen struck out, Jim Tomei doubled, he doubled home Bell. 5-2. Fonseca would single, so 2 on and 2 out, tying run at the plate. And before Bobby Avila went down swinging. Cleveland in the 7th would get their leadoff man on. In fact, they'd get the first 2 on, so they had a shot again in the top of the 7th with Victor Martinez and Kenny Lofton on base, 2 on, nobody out. But then Lou Boudreau hit into a fielder's choice. Manny Ramirez would walk, bases loaded, 1 out. Albert Bell strikeout. Al Rosen, fielder's choice, inning over. And after that, the Cardinals then put the game out of reach with 1 out after a Pujols strikeout. McGuire drew a walk. Simmons a 2-run home run, 7-2 Cardinals. And that was essentially all she wrote. Cleveland would get their first 2 on in the 8th inning, but a double play and a strikeout took care of that. And then in the 9th, the Cleveland Ball Club would be sat down in order. And the Cardinals win Game 3, 7-2. So now with the Sunday afternoon game for February 16, the Cardinals looking for the sweep, and they would get it. The final score, 6-3 St. Louis, sweeping the series. They'll take on Atlanta for the league championship as the World Series champion. Cleveland actually led 2-0 at one point. Cleveland with runs in the 2nd and the 3rd led 2-0. St. Louis then would tie it with 2 in the 4th. They would take the lead with a run in the 5th. And they would pick up 2 more in the 6th to go up 5-2, and they would add a run in the 8th to make it 6-2. Cleveland, attempting to rally in the 9th, would get a run, make it 6-3, but the Cardinals win, and they sweep the series. Chris Carpenter the win, 1-0. CC Sabathia is the loser, 0-1 in postseason. And Jason Mott saved 3 in the postseason. Musial hit his second postseason home run for St. Louis. No Cleveland player would go deep in this game. Let's tell you how the runs came home. Cleveland in the second inning. Albert Bell a leadoff double. Rosen singled him home. So the first run of the game and a man on, nobody out, but then Cleveland couldn't do anything else. A fielder's choice. Blue double, but Tomei thrown out trying to score, and then Bobby Avila popped out. So Cleveland trying to be aggressive on the bases, and it might have really cost them. Cleveland would get another run in the third inning. Victor Martinez would strike out, but then Kenny Lofton would single. Boudreau would strike out. With 2 out, Lofton would steal second, get into scoring position, and Manny Ramirez would knock him in with a single before a fly out of Albert Bell took care of that. It would remain 2-0 Cleveland until the bottom of the fourth. McGuire walked, Simmons a double, 2 on and no one out. Simmons would single home a run, Frisch would pop out, Braun, a fielder's choice, got a run home, tie it at 2, and then the inning's over on a fly out. Steve Braun, again, is the Braun I'm referencing. He was a Cardinal in 1983. Cleveland wouldn't score again for a while. The Cardinals would. They would add a run in the 5th inning with 1 out. Musial, a home run, made it 3-2 Cardinals. Pujols would double, but then McGuire and Simmons were retired, and it remained 3-2 Cardinals going to the 6th. St. Louis would get a leadoff man on in the 6th as Tatis hit a bloop double, but then the Cardinals couldn't score. Actually, yes, they did. I'm lying to you. With 1 out, Frisch bounced to first for the first out. Braun lined to short, and then Smith singled home Tatis with a run, and then Smith would steal second and be doubled home by McGee. So the Cardinals would score the 2 in the 6th inning and lead 5-2. Cleveland, no serious threat in the 7th. The Cardinals would get a leadoff man on in the 7th and a double play, a base hit, and a fielder's choice took care of that. Cleveland in the 8th was retired in order. The Cardinals would then add an insurance run. With 1 out, Ozzie Smith a single. Willie McGee tripled him home. 6-1, 6-2 Cardinals. The Cardinals could not get that extra run home from third, and so Cleveland would come up in the 9th down by 4, and Albert Bell would single to start the inning. Al Rosen struck out. Frisch an error that allowed Tomei to reach 2 on, 1 out. Now you got the tying run on deck. Fonseca, a fielder's choice, 2 on, 2 out. Bake McBride would pinch hit. McBride was on the Indians in the early 80s, and he singled. So now you've got the tying run at the plate. So Cleveland had a shot. And Victor Martinez would fly out to end the game and the series. Cardinals win 6-3. They sweep the series. Cardinals-Braves for your World Championship in the Simulated Baseball League. We'll tell you about that series on the next clip.